A shrill cry shattered the silence of the night, slicing through the darkness with a desperation that could not be ignored. "Mommy, don't hurt us." The words echoed off the walls, trembling with fear, raw and pleading. In the dimly lit bedroom, two small faces pressed together, eyes wide and glistening with tears. Emma clutched her little brother, her arms wrapped protectively around him as their mother's shadow loomed in the doorway, her breath ragged, her eyes wild with something neither child could name. The air was thick with dread, every second stretching into eternity. The children's hearts pounded in their chests, their bodies frozen between hope and terror. Emma's voice, usually so soft and gentle, now rang out with a courage she didn't know she possessed. "Please, Mummy, please don't." But the pleas seemed to vanish into the void, swallowed by the storm that raged inside their mother. Miles away, in a sleek, silent apartment overlooking the city, a man sat alone at his desk. Papers were scattered before him, the glow of his computer screen casting sharp shadows across his face. He was a man accustomed to control, to order, to solving problems with a signature or a phone call. Yet tonight, a strange unease gnawed at him, a restlessness he couldn't explain. He reached for his phone, thumb hovering over the screen, as if searching for a reason to call home. A sudden chill ran down his spine. He paused, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside his window, feeling a heaviness settle in his chest. He shook his head, dismissing the feeling, but it lingered, stubborn and insistent. He didn't know that at that very moment, his children's world was unraveling, that their cries for help were ricocheting through the night, unheard by anyone who could save them. Back in the house, Emma squeezed her brother tighter, her own tears falling silently. She wished for her father, wished for the days when laughter filled their home instead of fear. She wished for someone, anyone, to hear her scream. And as the night pressed in, one truth became clear. What happened next would change their lives forever. There was a time when the house on Willow Lane was filled with sunlight and laughter, when the walls echoed with the sound of children, as feet racing down the hallway, and the kitchen was alive with the scent of cinnamon and fresh bread. Emma remembered those mornings best, her mother humming softly as she braided Emma's hair, her father swooping in to steal a kiss from both of them before heading out the door. Her little brother Jamie would giggle and tug at her sleeve, eager to be included in every game, every story, every moment. In those days, the world felt safe and whole. The family would gather around the dinner table, sharing stories and jokes, their faces illuminated by the golden glow of the chandelier. Emma's father, Daniel, would listen intently to every word, his eyes crinkling with pride as Emma recited her spelling words or Jamie showed off a new drawing. Their mother, Laura, would smile and laugh, her hands gentle as she served second helpings and wiped away stray crumbs from Jamie's cheeks. On weekends, they would pile into the car and drive to the park, the windows rolled down, music playing, and the wind tangling their hair. Daniel would push Jamie on the swings while Laura and Emma picked wildflowers, weaving them into crowns and necklaces. They would return home, sun-kissed and tired, collapsing onto the living room floor for movie nights and popcorn. In those moments, the world outside seemed distant and unimportant. All that mattered was the warmth of each other's company. But as the seasons changed, so did the rhythm of their lives. Daniel's work began to demand more of his time. Late nights at the office, business trips that stretched from days into weeks. He would call home, his voice warm but weary, promising to be back soon to make it up to them. Laura would assure him that everything was fine, that the children were thriving, that she was managing just as she always had. But when the calls ended and the house grew quiet, a different Laura would emerge, one who moved through the rooms with a heaviness in her step, her laughter replaced by long silences and sharp sighs. Emma noticed the changes first. Her mother's smiles became brittle, her patience thin. Small things, a spilled glass of milk, a misplaced toy, would spark sudden flashes of anger. Laura's voice, once soothing, now carried an edge that made Emma's stomach twist. Jamie, too young to understand, would shrink away, his eyes searching Emma's for reassurance. Emma tried to be good, to be helpful, to do everything right, hoping it would bring back the mother she remembered. The cracks widened as Daniel's absences grew longer. Laura stopped joining them for movie nights, retreating to her bedroom with the door closed. The kitchen, once the heart of their home, became a place of hurried meals and tense silences. Emma would watch her mother stare out the window, her expression distant, her fingers drumming restlessly on the countertop. Sometimes, Laura would snap at the children for no reason, her words sharp and cold. Other times, she would burst into tears, apologizing and pulling them into tight, desperate hugs. Emma missed her father fiercely. She would lie awake at night, listening to the sound of her mother's footsteps pacing the hallway, wishing for the comfort of Daniel's steady presence. When he did come home, the house would come alive again, if only for a little while. Laura would put on her brightest smile, the children would cling to him, and for a few precious days, it would almost feel like before. But the illusion never lasted. Daniel's work would call him away again, and the shadows would creep back in. The confusion weighed heavily on Emma. She didn't understand why her mother was so sad, why her father had to leave so often, why the laughter had faded from their home. She tried to shield Jamie from the worst of it, reading him stories and making up games to distract him from the tension that simmered just beneath the surface. But even Jamie, with his boundless energy and innocent heart, began to sense that something was wrong. He would cling to Emma, his small hand gripping hers tightly, his eyes wide with questions he didn't know how to ask. As the months passed, the distance between Laura and her children grew. She became unpredictable, one moment affectionate, the next withdrawn or irritable. Emma learned to read the signs, to tiptoe around her mother's moods, to keep Jamie quiet when Laura was having a bad day. The house that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a maze of invisible tripwires, each day a careful dance to avoid setting off another storm. Daniel, for all his love and good intentions, remained blind to the depth of Laura's struggles. He saw only glimpses, the forced smiles, the occasional outburst, the children's quietness when he returned home. He told himself it was just the stress of parenting, the strain of his demanding job, the normal ups and downs of family life. He promised himself that things would get better, that he would find more time, that he would fix whatever was broken. But the cracks continued to spread, silent and relentless. The warmth that had once filled their home was replaced by a chill that seeped into every corner, every conversation. Emma clung to her memories of happier days, holding them close like a secret treasure, even as the present grew darker and more uncertain. And so the stage was set, a family once united by love, now divided by absence, confusion, and fear. The children, caught in the crossfire, learned to hide their pain behind brave faces. The mother, lost in her own turmoil, drifted further from the ones who needed her most. The father, unaware of the storm brewing at home, remained just out of reach. The echoes of laughter faded, replaced by the quiet ache of longing and the unspoken question that haunted them all. Would things ever be the same again? It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that began with gray skies and a restless wind rattling the windows. Emma woke to the sound of her mother's footsteps, heavy and hurried, moving from room to room with a purpose that felt dangerous. Jamie was still asleep, his small body curled beneath the covers, unaware of the tension that had settled over the house like a storm cloud. Breakfast was a quiet affair. Laura moved mechanically, setting bowls on the table, her eyes fixed on some distant point. Emma tried to make herself invisible, helping Jamie with his cereal, careful not to spill a drop. But Jamie, still half dreaming, knocked over his glass of juice, the bright liquid spreading across the table in a sudden vivid stain. Laura's reaction was instant and explosive. She slammed her hand down, the sound sharp and startling. "Can you do anything right?" she snapped, her voice rising. Jamie flinched, his eyes filling with tears. Emma reached for his hand, but Laura's anger was already spiraling. She grabbed Jamie's arm, her grip too tight, and shook him once, hard enough to make him cry out. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor, and tried to step between her mother and brother. "Please, Mommy, don't hurt us," she pleaded, her voice trembling. Laura's face twisted with frustration and something darker, her hand raised as if to strike again. For a moment, time seemed to freeze, Emma's breath caught, Jamie's sobs echoing in the silence. Then, as suddenly as it began, Laura let go. She turned away, her shoulders shaking, and disappeared into her bedroom, slamming the door behind her. The house was left in stunned quiet, the only sound Jamie's hiccuping sobs and Emma's own ragged breathing. Emma knelt beside her brother, pulling him into her arms. She rocked him gently, whispering soothing words she barely believed herself. Her mind raced, searching for something, anything that could make this stop. She remembered her father, his promise to always protect them, his number saved in her phone. With trembling hands, she reached for it, her fingers cold and clumsy. She led Jamie to the closet, the safest place she could think of, and closed the door behind them. In the darkness, she dialed her father's number, pressing the phone to her ear. It rang and rang, each tone a reminder of how far away he felt. When the voicemail picked up, Emma's voice was barely more than a whisper, thick with fear and urgency. "Daddy, please, we need you. Mommy's really mad. I'm scared. Please come home." She hesitated, listening to Jamie's quiet sniffles, then added, "Please hurry." She ended the call, her heart pounding, unsure if she had said enough, unsure if he would understand. The minutes stretched on, each one heavier than the last. Emma held Jamie close, her mind replaying the morning's events, the look in her mother's eyes, the sting of her words. She wondered if she had done the right thing, if her father would even listen to her message. She wondered if things would ever go back to the way they were, or if the world had changed forever in the space of a single morning. Outside the closet, the house was silent. Emma could hear the faint sound of her mother crying behind her bedroom door, the muffled sobs of someone lost in their own pain. She wanted to go to her, to make things better, but fear kept her rooted in place. She was just a child, and the weight of the world felt impossibly heavy on her small shoulders. As the day wore on, Emma's hope flickered between bright and dim. She imagined her father listening to her message, dropping everything to come home and save them. She imagined him not hearing it at all, too busy or too far away to notice their plea. The uncertainty gnawed at her, a question with no answer. Would he listen? Would he come? In the darkness of the closet, Emma squeezed Jamie's hand and whispered a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. "It's going to be okay. Daddy will come. He has to." But as the hours passed and the house remained silent, the question lingered, heavy and unresolved, hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. The days that followed blurred together, each one marked by a growing sense of dread that settled over the house like a heavy fog. Emma and Jamie learned to read the air, to sense the subtle shifts in their mother's mood. The way her jaw tightened, the way her footsteps grew sharp and hurried, the way her eyes darted restlessly from one corner of the room to another. They became experts in silence, in moving quietly, in making themselves small and invisible. Laura's outbursts, once rare and fleeting, now erupted with alarming frequency. The smallest misstep, a forgotten chore, a misplaced toy, a question asked at the wrong moment, could ignite her temper. Her words cut deep, laced with bitterness and accusation, and sometimes her hands followed, quick and unpredictable. Emma bore the brunt of it, shielding Jamie as best she could, absorbing the blows with a stoic bravery that belied her years. She learned to anticipate her mother's anger, to distract Jamie with stories or games, to usher him out of the room before things could escalate. Jamie, once so carefree, grew quiet and watchful. He clung to Emma, his small hand seeking hers whenever Laura's voice rose. He flinched at sudden movements, his eyes wide and uncertain. At night, he would crawl into Emma's bed, pressing close to her, his breath warm against her shoulder. Emma would hold him and whisper promises she desperately wanted to believe. That things would get better, that their father would come home, that they were safe. But safety felt like a distant memory. The house, once filled with laughter and light, now seemed to shrink around them, its walls closing in. Emma missed her father with an ache that never quite faded. She replayed the voicemail in her mind, wondering if he had heard it, if he understood how much they needed him. She watched the clock, counting the hours, hoping for the sound of his key in the door. Miles away, Daniel was consumed by work. His days were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and deadlines, his mind always racing ahead to the next task. He told himself he was doing it for his family, that the long hours and late nights would pay off in the end. But beneath the surface, a nagging guilt tugged at him, a sense that he was missing something important, that his absence was costing more than he realized. One evening, as he sat in his office, the city lights twinkling outside his window, Daniel's phone buzzed with a new voicemail notification. He almost ignored it, distracted by the stack of paperwork in front of him, but something in the back of his mind urged him to listen. He pressed play, expecting a routine message, but Emma's voice, small, trembling, desperate, filled the room. "Daddy, please, we need you. Mommy's really mad. I'm scared. Please come home. Please hurry." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He sat frozen, the phone pressed to his ear, his heart pounding. He played the message again and again, searching for meaning in the fear that laced his daughter's voice. He tried to call home, his hands shaking, but Lavra answered with a brittle calmness that set his teeth on edge. "Everything's fine, Daniel," she insisted, her tone clipped. "The kids are just being dramatic. You know how they get when you're away." He pressed her, his concern growing, but she brushed him off, her patience wearing thin. "I'm tired, Daniel. I can't do this right now." "We're fine. Just focus on your work." He hung up, unsettled. The image of Emma's face, her wide eyes and trembling lips, haunted him. He tried to convince himself that Laura was right, that the children were just acting out, that he was overreacting. But the doubt lingered, gnawing at him, making it impossible to concentrate. Back at home, Laura's mood swung wildly from one extreme to another. Some days she was withdrawn and silent, barely acknowledging the children's presence. Other days, she was irritable and volatile, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. Emma learned to anticipate the storms, to keep Jamie occupied and out of sight, to clean up messes before Laura could notice. She became the caretaker, the protector, the buffer between her mother's rage and her brother's innocence. Jamie grew more anxious, his sleep troubled by nightmares. He would wake in the middle of the night, crying out for Emma, his small body trembling. Emma would hold him close, stroking his hair, whispering soothing words until he drifted back to sleep. She tried to be strong for him, to hide her own fear, but the weight of responsibility pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. School offered a brief respite, a few hours of normalcy where Emma could pretend to be just another child. But even there, the shadows followed her. She flinched at loud noises, struggled to concentrate, and avoided questions about home. Her teachers noticed the change, her quietness, her tired eyes, the way she jumped at the sound of her name. But when they asked if everything was all right, Emma forced a smile and nodded. She didn't know how to explain the chaos that waited for her at home, didn't know if anyone would believe her. Laura's isolation deepened. She stopped answering calls from friends, stopped inviting neighbors over, stopped leaving the house except for the bare essentials. The world outside seemed to shrink until it was just the three of them, Lavra, Emma, and Jamie, trapped in a cycle of fear and uncertainty. Emma watched her mother with a mixture of sadness and resentment, longing for the woman she used to be, mourning the loss of the mother she remembered. Daniel, meanwhile, struggled with indecision. He replayed Emma's voicemail over and over, each time feeling the urgency in her voice more acutely. He tried to reach out again, but Laura's responses grew colder, more defensive. "You're not here, Daniel. You don't know what it's like." "I'm doing my best." He considered coming home, but work obligations piled up, and Laura's reassurances, however strained, kept him at bay. He told himself he would visit soon, that he would check in on the children, that he would make things right. But the days slipped by, and the distance between him and his family grew wider. Emma's hope began to wane. She watched the door, waiting for her father, but he never came. She tried to keep Jamie's spirits up, inventing stories about their father's adventures, promising that he would return any day now. But Jamie's questions grew more insistent, his faith harder to sustain. One afternoon, after a particularly violent outburst, Emma found herself sitting on the floor of her bedroom, Jamie curled up beside her, both of them silent and exhausted. She stared at the phone, willing it to ring, willing her father to hear her silent plea. She wondered if he had forgotten them, if he even cared. The days that followed blurred together, each one marked by a growing sense of dread that settled over the house like a heavy fog. Emma and Jamie learned to read the air, to sense the subtle shifts in their mother's mood, the way her jaw tightened, the way her footsteps grew sharp and hurried, the way her eyes darted restlessly from one corner of the room to another. They became experts in silence, in moving quietly, in making themselves small and invisible. Laura's outbursts, once rare and fleeting, now erupted with alarming frequency. The smallest misstep, a forgotten chore, a misplaced toy, a question asked at the wrong moment, could ignite her temper. Her words cut deep, laced with bitterness and accusation, and sometimes her hands followed, quick and unpredictable. Emma bore the brunt of it, shielding Jamie as best she could, absorbing the blows with a stoic bravery that belied her years. She learned to anticipate her mother's anger, to distract Jamie with stories or games, to usher him out of the room before things could escalate. Jamie, once so carefree, grew quiet and watchful. He clung to Emma, his small hand seeking hers whenever Laura's voice rose. He flinched at sudden movements, his eyes wide and uncertain. At night, he would crawl into Emma's bed, pressing close to her, his breath warm against her shoulder. Emma would hold him and whisper promises she desperately wanted to believe. That things would get better, that their father would come home, that they were safe. But safety felt like a distant memory. The house, once filled with laughter and light, now seemed to shrink around them, its walls closing in. Emma missed her father with an ache that never quite faded. She replayed the voicemail in her mind, wondering if he had heard it, if he understood how much they needed him. She watched the clock, counting the hours, hoping for the sound of his key in the door. Miles away, Daniel was consumed by work. His days were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and deadlines, his mind always racing ahead to the next task. He told himself he was doing it for his family, that the long hours and late nights would pay off in the end. But beneath the surface, a nagging guilt tugged at him, a sense that he was missing something important, that his absence was costing more than he realized. One evening, as he sat in his office, the city lights twinkling outside his window, Daniel's phone buzzed with a new voicemail notification. He almost ignored it, distracted by the stack of paperwork in front of him, but something in the back of his mind urged him to listen. He pressed play, expecting a routine message, but Emma's voice, small, trembling, desperate, filled the room. "Daddy, please, we need you. Mommy's really mad. I'm scared. Please come home. Please hurry." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He sat frozen, the phone pressed to his ear, his heart pounding. He played the message again and again, searching for meaning in the fear that laced his daughter's voice. He tried to call home, his hands shaking, but Laura answered with a brittle calmness that set his teeth on edge. "Everything's fine, Daniel," she insisted, her tone clipped. "The kids are just being dramatic. You know how they get when you're away." He pressed her, his concern growing, but she brushed him off, her patience wearing thin. "I'm tired, Daniel. I can't do this right now." "We're fine. Just focus on your work." He hung up, unsettled. The image of Emma's face, her wide eyes and trembling lips, haunted him. He tried to convince himself that Laura was right, that the children were just acting out, that he was overreacting. But the doubt lingered, gnawing at him, making it impossible to concentrate. Back at home, Laura's mood swung wildly from one extreme to another. Some days she was withdrawn and silent, barely acknowledging the children's presence. Other days, she was irritable and volatile, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. Emma learned to anticipate the storms, to keep Jamie occupied and out of sight, to clean up messes before Laura could notice. She became the caretaker, the protector, the buffer between her mother's rage and her brother's innocence. Jamie grew more anxious, his sleep troubled by nightmares. He would wake in the middle of the night, crying out for Emma, his small body trembling. Emma would hold him close, stroking his hair, whispering soothing words until he drifted back to sleep. She tried to be strong for him, to hide her own fear, but the weight of responsibility pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. School offered a brief respite, a few hours of normalcy where Emma could pretend to be just another child. But even there, the shadows followed her. She flinched at loud noises, struggled to concentrate, and avoided questions about home. Her teachers noticed the change, her quietness, her tired eyes, the way she jumped at the sound of her name. But when they asked if everything was all right, Emma forced a smile and nodded. She didn't know how to explain the chaos that waited for her at home, didn't know if anyone would believe her. Laura's isolation deepened. She stopped answering calls from friends, stopped inviting neighbors over, stopped leaving the house except for the bare essentials. The world outside seemed to shrink until it was just the three of them, Laura, Emma, and Jamie, trapped in a cycle of fear and uncertainty. Emma watched her mother with a mixture of sadness and resentment, longing for the woman she used to be, mourning the loss of the mother she remembered. Daniel, meanwhile, struggled with indecision. He replayed Emma's voicemail over and over, each time feeling the urgency in her voice more acutely. He tried to reach out again, but Laura's responses grew colder, more defensive. "You're not here, Daniel. You don't know what it's like." "I'm doing my best." He considered coming home, but work obligations piled up, and Laura's reassurances, however strained, kept him at bay. He told himself he would visit soon, that he would check in on the children, that he would make things right. But the days slipped by, and the distance between him and his family grew wider. He realized with a crushing sense of guilt watched the door, that he had missed the signs, that he had failed to protect the people he loved most. He tried to keep Jamie's spirits up, inventing stories about their father's adventures, promising that he would return any day now. But Jamie's questions grew more insistent, his faith harder to sustain. One afternoon, after a particularly violent outburst, Emma found herself sitting on the floor of her bedroom, Jamie curled up beside her, both of them silent and exhausted. She stared at the phone, willing it to ring, willing her father to hear her silent plea. She wondered if he had forgotten them, if he even cared. If only Daniel knew what was happening behind closed doors, if only he could see the bruises that Emma hid beneath her sleeves, the fear that clouded Jamie's eyes, the way their laughter had been replaced by silence. If only he could feel the weight of their longing, the ache of their hope slowly fading. But he didn't know. Not yet. And as the days grew darker, the children clung to each other, their bond forged in the crucible of fear and uncertainty. They waited, hearts heavy with longing, for a rescue that seemed further away with each passing day. The world outside moved on, oblivious to the storm raging within the walls of their home. And the question that haunted Emma's dreams remained unanswered. Would anyone ever come to save them? Daniel's mind was a storm of worry as he drove through the night, the city lights fading behind him, the road stretching endlessly ahead. He couldn't shake the sound of Emma's voice from his head, the fear in her words echoing with every mile. He had tried to convince himself that Laura was right, that the children were just acting out, but the doubt had grown too loud to ignore. He needed to see for himself. He needed to know. The house was dark when he arrived, the windows shuttered, the porch light flickering weakly. He parked in the driveway, his heart pounding, and let himself in with his key. The air inside was heavy, thick with the scent of something burned and the faint sour tang of fear. He called out, his voice low and uncertain, but there was no answer. Only silence, deep and unsettling. He moved through the house, his footsteps muffled on the carpet, his eyes searching for any sign of his family. The living room was a mess, cushions strewn across the floor, a broken lamp in the corner, toys abandoned in haste. He felt a chill run down his spine. Something was wrong. He hurried down the hallway, past the closed doors, listening for any sound. A muffled cry stopped him in his tracks. It was Jamie, his voice small and trembling, pleading for mercy. "Please, Mommy, I'll be good. Please don't." The words were cut off by a sharp, angry shout from Lovra, her voice raw with frustration. "Why can't you just listen? Why do you always make me so angry?" Daniel's blood ran cold. He rushed to the source of the noise, his heart hammering in his chest. He burst into the children's bedroom just as Lovra raised her hand, her face twisted with rage, her body shaking. Emma stood between her mother and Jamie, her arms outstretched, her eyes wide with terror. Jamie cowered behind her, his cheeks streaked with tears. "Lavra!" Daniel's voice was thunder, booming through the room. Lavra froze, her hands suspended in the air, her eyes snapping to his. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the children's ragged breathing, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Daniel crossed the room in 3 strides, placing himself between Lavra and the children. His presence was a wall, solid and unyielding. He looked at Lavra, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion, the desperation, the wildness in her eyes. But he also saw the fear she had instilled in their children, the damage she had done. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "What is happening here?" Laura's face crumpled, her anger collapsing into tears. "You don't understand, Daniel. You're never here. You don't know what it's like. They never listen, they never help." Daniel cut her off, his voice cold and sharp. "They're children, Lavra. They're scared. Look at them." He gestured to Emma and Jamie, who clung to each other, their eyes fixed on their father with a mixture of hope and terror. "What have you done to them?" Laura's shoulders sagged, her anger spent. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. "I didn't mean to. I can't do this alone anymore. I'm so tired, Daniel. I'm so tired." Emma and Jamie rushed to their father, burying their faces in his chest, their small bodies shaking with relief and fear. Daniel wrapped his arms around them, holding them close, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. He stroked their hair, whispering words of comfort, promising that he was there now, that he wouldn't let anything happen to them. He looked up at Lavra, his expression hardening. "This ends now. I'm not leaving you alone with them again. We need help, Lavra. All of us." Lavra shook her head, her tears flowing freely. "You don't know what it's been like. You're always gone, always working. I tried, Daniel. I really tried." Daniel's anger softened, replaced by a deep aching sadness. "I know I haven't been here. I know I let you down. But this," he glanced at the children, their faces pressed against his shirt. "This can't go on. We have to do better. For them." The room was silent, the weight of truth settling over them all. Lavra wept quietly, her body racked with sobs. Daniel held his children, feeling the enormity of what had been revealed, the pain and fear that had festered in his absence. Emma looked up at her father, her eyes shining with hope and uncertainty. "Are you staying, Daddy? Are you really here?" Daniel kissed her forehead, his voice steady and sure. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. I promise." Jamie clung to his father's arm, his grip tight and desperate. "Don't let her hurt us again, Daddy, please." Daniel hugged them both, his heart breaking. "I won't. I promise you, I won't." He turned back to Lavra, his voice gentle but firm. "We need help, Laura. You need help. I'll do whatever it takes, but I won't let this happen again." Lavra nodded, her face buried in her hands. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a hollow resignation. Daniel felt a surge of pity for her, but his resolve was unshakable. He would protect his children, no matter what. As the night wore on, Daniel sat with Emma and Jamie, holding them close, listening to their stories, their fears, their hopes. He realized how much he had missed, how much he had taken for granted. He vowed, then and there, to never let them down again. The confrontation had shattered the fragile illusion that had held their family together, exposing the pain and fear that had been hidden for so long. But in its place, Daniel saw the possibility of healing, of hope, of a new beginning. The children clung to him, their trust tentative but real, and for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt the stirrings of something like hope. The truth was out. The wounds were raw and deep, but they were no longer hidden. And as Daniel held his children, he knew that the hardest part was still to come, but they would face it together as a family. The morning after the confrontation, Daniel moved through the house with a new sense of purpose. The children clung to him, their trust fragile but growing, and he knew he had to act quickly to protect them. He called his old friend, Mark, a family lawyer he trusted with his life, and explained the situation in a voice that trembled with both anger and regret. Mark listened quietly, then promised to come over right away. Next, Daniel reached out to Dr. Patel, the children's pediatrician, and scheduled an urgent appointment. He explained that the children had been through a traumatic experience and needed to be seen as soon as possible. Dr. Patel, sensing the gravity in Daniel's voice, cleared her schedule and told him to bring Emma and Jamie in that afternoon. As Daniel packed a bag for the children, Laura watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, her face a mask of wounded pride. "You're making this worse, Daniel," she said, her voice cold. "You're blowing everything out of proportion." "I never hurt them. They're just sensitive. You know how Emma is, always dramatic." Daniel met her gaze, his own eyes steely. "I saw enough last night. I'm not taking any more chances." At the doctor's office, Emma and Jamie sat quietly, their hands entwined. Dr. Patel greeted them with gentle warmth, her eyes kind and reassuring. She examined them carefully, noting the bruises on Emma's arms and the fear in Jamie's eyes. She asked gentle questions, never pushing too hard, and Emma, feeling safe for the first time in months, began to talk. She told Dr. Patel about the shouting, the hitting, the nights spent hiding in the closet. Jamie nodded, his voice barely above a whisper as he described how scared he felt when Mommy got angry. Dr. Patel listened, her heart heavy, and documented everything. She assured Daniel that she would file a report and connect them with a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. "You did the right thing bringing them in," she said softly. "They need time, and they need to feel safe. And so do you." Back at home, Mark arrived, his briefcase in hand and his expression grave. He sat with Daniel at the kitchen table, listening as Daniel recounted everything he had seen and heard. Mark took notes, asked questions, and explained the next steps. "We'll need statements from the children and from anyone else who might have noticed something. The more evidence we have, the better." Daniel nodded, his resolve hardening. He called the children's school and asked to speak with their teachers. Mrs. Carter, Emma's teacher, was immediately concerned. "I've noticed Emma's been quieter lately," she admitted. "She flinches when someone raises their voice, and she's had a few unexplained bruises." "I was planning to call you, actually." Mr. Lopez, Jamie's preschool teacher, echoed her concerns. "Jamie's been withdrawn. He cries easily and he started having accidents again. I thought it might be the stress of you traveling, but now I'm not so sure." Daniel thanked them both and asked if they would be willing to provide statements. They agreed without hesitation, their voices filled with compassion and worry. The housekeeper, Maria, who had worked for the family for years, was next. She arrived that afternoon, her eyes wide with concern when she saw Daniel home in the middle of the week. When he explained what had happened, Maria's face crumpled. "I was afraid something was wrong," she confessed. "Mrs. Lavra has been so different lately." The children are always so quiet when she's around. I tried to talk to her, but she would just get angry. I'm so sorry, Mr. Daniel. I should have said something sooner. Daniel squeezed her hand, grateful for her honesty. You did what you could, Maria. Thank you for caring about them. As the evidence mounted, Laura's denial grew more desperate. She called Daniel's phone repeatedly, leaving angry voicemails, accusing him of turning the children against her. She insisted that Emma was lying, that Jamie was too young to remember anything clearly, that Daniel was just trying to punish her for his own absences. She even tried to charm Mark, insisting that she was just a stressed mother doing her best. But the truth was no longer hers to control. The children's stories matched, their fear too real to ignore. The teachers, the doctor, the housekeeper, all painted a picture of a home unraveling, of children in need of protection. Mark began preparing the paperwork for an emergency custody hearing, determined to keep Emma and Jamie safe. Daniel watched his children closely, seeing the small changes in them now that they felt safer. Emma began to smile again, though it was tentative, and Jamie started to play with his toys, his laughter returning in small bursts. But the scars were still there, just beneath the surface. At night, Emma would wake from nightmares, her cries muffled by her pillow, and Jamie would crawl into Daniel's bed, seeking comfort in his father's arms. Through it all, Daniel remained steadfast. He took time off work, determined to be present for every appointment, every meeting, every moment his children needed him. He spoke with a psychologist, learning how to help Emma and Jamie heal, how to rebuild the trust that had been broken. He leaned on Mark, on Dr. Patel, on the teachers and Maria, grateful for the network of support that had formed around his family. Laura, meanwhile, grew more isolated. Her friends stopped calling, her family kept their distance, and the walls she had built around herself began to close in. She refused therapy, insisting she didn't need help, that everyone was against her. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the truth could no longer be hidden. As the date for the custody hearing approached, Daniel felt a mixture of fear and hope. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in months, he believed that his children might finally be safe. Allies had emerged, the truth had come to light, and the fight for justice had truly begun. Just when Daniel thought he had finally secured a measure of safety for Emma and Jamie, the ground shifted beneath his feet. Laura, cornered by mounting evidence and the growing circle of allies around Daniel, lashed out in the only way she knew how, through the courts. She filed a motion, accusing Daniel of manipulating the children, of orchestrating a campaign to turn them against her, of trying to steal them away out of spite for her supposed failings as a wife and mother. The accusations were venomous, painting Daniel as a cold, absentee father who cared more for his business than his family. Laura's lawyer, sharp and relentless, demanded an immediate review of custody, arguing that the children were being used as pawns in a bitter marital dispute. The judge, wary of the escalating conflict and the emotional volatility on both sides, ordered an emergency hearing and, to Daniel's horror, ruled that Emma and Jamie be placed in temporary foster care while the investigation continued. The news hit Daniel like a physical blow. He watched, helpless, as social workers arrived at his door, their faces kind but resolute. Emma clung to him, her eyes wide with panic, her small hands gripping his shirt as if she could anchor herself to him. Jamie sobbed, his cries echoing through the house, begging not to be taken away. Daniel knelt before them, his own tears falling freely, promising that he would fight for them, that he would bring them home, that this was not the end. But the words felt hollow as the children were led away, their faces pressed to the car windows, their trust in the world shattered once more. Daniel stood in the driveway long after the car had disappeared, the silence around him heavy and suffocating. He felt powerless, stripped of the one thing that mattered most, his ability to protect his children. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, frantic phone calls, and sleepless nights. Mark worked tirelessly, gathering every piece of evidence, every statement, every report that could prove Daniel's case. Dr. Patel and a psychologist submitted their findings. The teachers and Maria wrote letters, and Daniel himself sat for hours recounting every detail, every moment, every sign he had missed. Meanwhile, Emma and Jamie struggled in the unfamiliar world of foster care. Their new home was safe, but it was not their own. They missed their father desperately, counting the days until they could see him again. Emma tried to be brave for Jamie, telling him stories at night, holding his hand when he cried, but she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. She wondered if they would ever go home, if their father would win the fight, or if they would be lost in the system forever. Laura, emboldened by her legal maneuver, doubled down on her narrative. She called Daniel, her voice icy and triumphant, warning him that she would never let him take her children. She posted on social media, painting herself as a victim, rallying distant friends and family to her side. But beneath the bravado, there was a desperation, a fear that the truth would eventually catch up to her. Daniel refused to give in to despair. Each night, he sat in the children's empty rooms, reading their favorite books aloud, refusing to let their absence break him. He wrote letters to Emma and Jamie, filling them with love and hope, promising that he was fighting for them with everything he had. He met with Mark every day, strategizing, preparing for the next hearing, determined to prove that his children belonged with him. The uncertainty was agonizing. The system moved slowly, each day stretching into the next, the outcome far from certain. Daniel's faith was tested, his resolve pushed to its limits. He wondered if justice would truly prevail, or if his children would be lost in the maze of bureaucracy and legal maneuvering. But even in the darkest moments, Daniel held on to hope. He remembered the look in Emma's eyes, the trust in Jamie's voice, the promise he had made to never let them down again. He would not give up. He would not let them be lost. The fight was far from over, and as the next hearing approached, one question burned in his mind. Would the truth be enough to bring his children home, or would the system fail them when they needed it most? The day of the hearing dawned gray and heavy, the courthouse looming against the sky like a fortress. Daniel arrived early, his heart pounding, his hands cold despite the warmth of the morning. Mark met him at the entrance, his face set with determination. "We're ready," he said quietly. "No matter what happens, you've done everything you can." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Laura sat at her table, her lawyer whispering urgently in her ear. She wore a crisp dress, her hair perfectly styled, her expression carefully composed. But Daniel saw the tremor in her hands, the way her eyes darted nervously around the room. Across the aisle, Emma and Jamie sat with their court-appointed advocate, their small faces pale but resolute. Emma squeezed Jamie's hand, her chin lifted in defiance. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Papers shuffled, voices hushed. The proceedings began with the lawyers presenting their cases, Laura's attorney painting her as a loving mother, overwhelmed but devoted, unfairly maligned by a distant, work-obsessed husband. Mark countered with the evidence, the doctor's reports, the teacher's statements, Maria's testimony, and Daniel's own account of what he had witnessed. But it was the children's voices that would matter most. Emma was called first. She walked to the witness stand, her steps small but steady, her eyes never leaving her father's face. The judge spoke gently, asking if she understood why she was there. Emma nodded, her voice clear. "I want to tell the truth." Mark began with simple questions, letting Emma describe her life at home. She spoke of the good days, the memories of laughter and warmth, but her voice faltered as she described how things had changed. "Mommy started getting mad a lot. She yelled and sometimes she hit us. I tried to protect Jamie. I tried to be good, but it didn't help." Laura's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Emma continued, her voice trembling but strong. "I called Daddy because I was scared. I didn't know what else to do." The cross-examination was gentle at first, but then Laura's lawyer pressed her, suggesting she was exaggerating, that she missed her father and wanted to live with him. Emma's eyes filled with tears. but she didn't back down. I love Mommy. I just want her to get help. But I don't want to be scared anymore. Jamie was next. He clung to his advocate's hand as he took the stand, his voice barely above a whisper. He nodded when asked if he loved his parents, but when the questions turned to his mother's anger, he shrank into himself. She yells a lot. Sometimes she hurts Emma. I don't like it when she's mad. His words were simple, but the truth in them was undeniable. Daniel's turn came. He stood, his voice steady but thick with emotion, and told the court about the night he came home, about the fear in his children's eyes, about the guilt that haunted him for not seeing the signs sooner. I failed them, he admitted, his voice breaking. But I'm here now. I will do whatever it takes to keep them safe. Mark guided him through the evidence, the steps he had taken, the support of the teachers, the doctor, and Maria. Daniel spoke of the changes he has seen in his children, the nightmares, the fear, the way they clung to him. They deserved to feel safe. They deserved to be children again. Then it was Laura's turn. She took the stand, her composure slipping as the questions grew more pointed. She insisted she was a good mother, that she had never meant to hurt her children, that Daniel was twisting everything to punish her. But under cross-examination, her stories began to unravel. Mark pressed her gently but relentlessly, pointing out the inconsistencies, the evidence, the witnesses who had seen her anger. Laura's voice grew shrill, her answers defensive. She blamed Daniel for being absent, for leaving her alone, for making her feel worthless. She accused Emma of lying, of being manipulative, of turning Jamie against her. The judge watched closely, his expression unreadable. Finally, Mark asked the question that hung over the entire case. Do you believe your children are lying, Mrs. Taylor? Laura hesitated, her eyes darting to Emma and Jamie. For a moment, the mask slipped, and the pain and confusion beneath her anger showed through. I don't know. I just wanted to be a good mother. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at Laura, then at the children, then at Daniel. He spoke quietly, his words measured. This is not an easy decision. But the safety and well-being of Emma and Jamie must come first. He reviewed the evidence, the testimony, the reports. He acknowledged Laura's struggles, her need for help, but made it clear that the children's fear was real, their stories consistent, their need for safety paramount. Laura broke down, her tears flowing freely, her shoulders shaking with the weight of everything she had lost. Daniel felt a surge of pity, but also relief. He looked at Emma and Jamie, their faces tense with hope and fear, and reached out his hand. They ran to him, clinging to him, their tears mingling with his own. The judge's decision was clear. Emma and Jamie would be placed in Daniel's custody. Laura would be required to seek treatment and attend supervised visits until she could prove she was ready to be a safe presence in their lives. The courtroom erupted in quiet sobs and sighs of relief. Daniel knelt, holding his children close, whispering promises of safety and love. Emma buried her face in his shoulder, her body shaking with relief. Jamie clung to his father's neck, his small voice muffled but sure. We're going home, Daddy? Daniel nodded, his own tears falling. Yes, sweetheart. We're going home. Laura was led from the courtroom, her head bowed, her future uncertain. Daniel watched her go, his heart heavy with sorrow for what might have been, but grateful for the chance to rebuild what had been broken. As they left the courthouse, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm light over the steps. Daniel held Emma and Jamie's hands, their steps light, their faces turned toward the future. The fight was over, but the journey of healing was just beginning. The truth had been believed. Justice had prevailed. And as they walked into the sunlight, Daniel knew that, together, they could face whatever came next. The first night back home, the house felt different. The air was lighter, the shadows less menacing, as if the walls themselves had exhaled a long-held breath. Daniel tucked Emma and Jamie into their beds, sitting with them until their eyes grew heavy and their breathing slowed. He watched them sleep, their faces peaceful for the first time in months, and felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. He whispered a silent promise to them, to himself, to never let them feel alone or afraid again. In the days that followed, Daniel set about rebuilding their lives with gentle determination. He took a leave of absence from work, turning down meetings and calls, making it clear to everyone that his children came first. Mornings began with pancakes and laughter, the kitchen filled with the sound of Jamie's giggles and Emma's shy, hopeful smiles. Daniel walked them to school, holding their hands tightly, and waited at the gate every afternoon, his presence a steady reassurance. Therapy became a new routine, a place where Emma and Jamie could speak their truths without fear. Dr. Patel recommended a child psychologist, Dr. Lin, whose office was filled with soft toys and sunlight. At first, Emma was hesitant, her words guarded, but Dr. Lin's kindness and patience slowly coaxed her out. She drew pictures of her family, some bright and colorful, others shadowed and gray. She talked about her fears, her anger, her longing for things to be like before. Jamie, too, found comfort in the gentle rhythm of play therapy, his nightmares fading as he learned to trust the world again. Daniel attended every session, learning how to support his children's healing. He listened, really listened, to their stories and their silences. He apologized for the times he hadn't been there, for the signs he'd missed, for the pain they'd endured. He told them, again and again, that none of it was their fault, that they were loved beyond measure, that he would always protect them. The housekeeper Maria returned, her presence a balm to the children. She baked their favorite cookies, sang old lullabies, and filled the house with warmth. The teachers at school checked in often, sending notes home about Emma's growing confidence and Jamie's laughter returning to the playground. The network of support that had formed during the crisis remained, a safety net woven from care and vigilance. Lavra, meanwhile, began her own journey. The course order was clear. She was to attend therapy, participate in parenting classes, and submit to regular evaluations before any unsupervised contact with the children could be considered. At first, she resisted, her anger and shame a barrier she could not cross. But as the weeks passed, something in her shifted. She began to attend her sessions, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes with a quiet determination. She wrote letters to Emma and Jamie, apologizing for her actions, promising to get better, asking for their forgiveness. Daniel read the letters first, sharing them with the children when he felt they were ready. Supervised visits were arranged in a neutral, welcoming space. The first time, Emma clung to Daniel's hand, her body tense, her eyes wary. Lavra arrived, her face pale, her hands trembling. She knelt before her children, tears streaming down her cheeks, and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I'm getting help. I love you both so much." Emma and Jamie listened, their responses cautious but not unkind. Each visit grew a little easier, the wounds slowly beginning to heal. At home, Daniel created new traditions. Friday nights became movie nights, with popcorn and blankets piled high on the couch. Saturday mornings were for pancakes and silly songs, Sunday afternoons for walks in the park. He encouraged Emma to invite friends over, to fill the house with laughter and light. Jamie took up drawing, his pictures now filled with bright colors and smiling faces. The nightmares grew less frequent. Emma began to sleep through the night, her dreams no longer haunted by fear. Jamie's laughter rang out, clear and unburdened. Daniel watched them, his heart swelling with pride and relief. He knew the road ahead would not always be easy. Healing was not a straight line, and there would be setbacks and hard days, but they were together, and that was enough. One evening, as Daniel tucked the children into bed, Emma looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Promise you'll never leave us again, Daddy?" she whispered. Daniel knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. "I promise, sweetheart, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Jamie reached for him, his small arms wrapping around Daniel's neck. "We love you, Daddy." Daniel hugged them both, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you more than anything in the world. You're my everything." As the weeks turned into months, the family found a new rhythm. The pain of the past did not disappear, but it no longer defined them. They learned to talk about their feelings, to ask for help, to trust in the love that bound them together. Daniel kept his promise, showing up every day in big ways and small, proving to Emma and Jamie that they were safe, that they were cherished, that they were home. Justice had been served, but more importantly, hope had been restored. The family, once fractured by fear and silence, began to heal, one day, one word, one act of love at a time. Years passed, and the house on Willow Lane blossomed with new life. The garden, once neglected, now overflowed with wildflowers and laughter. Emma, now a teenager, moved through the world with a quiet confidence, her eyes bright and her smile easy. She excelled in school, her love of art blossoming into a passion that filled her room with color and hope. Jamie, taller and braver, chased after his dreams with the same boundless energy he once used to outrun shadows. He played soccer, made friends easily, and filled the house with stories and laughter. Looking back, both children remembered the darkness, but it no longer defined them. They spoke openly about their journey, about the pain and the fear, but also about the strength they found in each other and in their father's unwavering love. Emma sometimes shared her story with classmates who seemed sad or withdrawn, offering a gentle hand and a listening ear. Jamie, too, learned to recognize when someone needed help, never hesitating to speak up for a friend. Daniel watched his children grow with a heart full of gratitude. He never forgot the nights spent worrying, the courtroom battles, the slow, steady work of healing. He knew the scars would always be there, faint reminders of a time when hope seemed out of reach. But he also knew that love, patience, and the courage to act had changed everything. One evening, as the sun set and the family gathered on the porch, Daniel turned to the camera, his voice steady and sincere. "If you're watching this, I want you to know that you are not alone. If you hear a child's cry, if you see the signs, don't look away. Listen. Ask questions. Be the person who cares enough to act. My children are safe today because someone listened, because I finally listened. Don't wait for someone else to step in. You could be the difference between despair and hope, between fear and safety." He paused, his eyes shining with conviction. Share your story. Reach out for help if you need it. And if you know someone who might be suffering in silence, let them know they're not alone. Together, we can break the cycle. Together, we can build a world where every child feels safe, loved, and heard. Emma and Jamie joined him, their arms around his shoulders, their faces radiant with hope. The camera lingered on their smiles, the warmth of their embrace, the promise of a future shaped by courage and compassion. And as the screen faded to black, an invitation appeared. If you or someone you know needs help, don't wait. Share your story below and let's support each other. Every voice matters. Every child deserves to be safe.